Hey everyone, Amit here. Thank you for continuing all the materials. Now I just wanted to take this in a slightly different direction. So course dad bod, diet to look good. I know it's a little different than the other aspects of the career trainings and courses and materials that we've done thus far, but this one is, in my personal opinion, also extremely important. I am a firm believer in if you look great, you feel great, other people absorb that energy that you bring to a room. If you're confident in your own skin, in your appearance, they see it as well. You notice that other people notice, which is fantastic. So I wanted to share with you some of my secrets that I personally use. I've developed by speaking with other people and just a ton of research over the last like 20 or so years. So yeah, let's jump right in. Okay, so in this diet to look good, we will be covering how to eat to look amazing, which breaks down into dieting for weight loss and eating to gain and maintain muscle mass and tone, diet hacks, supplementing for physical and mental health, and my secret weapon, my turbocharged green smoothie, which is actually a very powerful meal replacement. For anyone doing smoothies out there already, I'll give you some of my own personal recommendations, what my secret sauce is to stay satiated, stay full, and also give your body a ton of nutrition. If you're looking to lose weight, this is one of my secret weapons to replace meals. So let's jump in to the first topic, kickstarting your weight loss. So now, if you struggle with your weight, this is for you. I know a lot of folks out there, they may appear lean and thin, like skinny limbs, skinny legs, but they'll have a gut, typically called a beer belly. And what happens is, and this is how it ties into the career aspect, because working a 9 to 5 year after year puts a lot of stress on you, puts a lot of stress on your relationships outside of work, especially if you are, if you're married, if you've got kids. I don't have to preach to the choir here, but many times if you have issues at work, you bring it home, and it's like a constant feedback loop of stress, right? You take it out on your family, or your family responds negatively towards you because you're stressed, you're agitated. What happens is there's a couple things that happen. So when you're under stress, your body tends to accumulate fat around your belly region. Now, everyone's genetically different, so you may notice it all around your body globally. But for a lot of people, they end up just getting a gut. So they might think they're healthy because their limbs are still skinny or skinny-ish. They may not have any muscle tone in it, but just because they're not globally gaining weight, they think that they're doing okay. But that's not the case. And you'll notice this because a lot of those folks have diabetes, heart disease, they have inflammation issues due to the excess amount of fat that's accumulated on their body. They have joint pains and just a ton of other issues. Cholesterol being, the silent one as well. So these methods work to help release that fat from your system, even if it's global or if it's just around your belly. Because I will tell you this, very important point. Stress contributes to the accumulation of fat around your center. A big part of it is linked to cortisol, and a big part of it is also linked to carbohydrates. So if you're under a lot of stress and you're consuming a lot of carbohydrates, that's when the fat starts accumulating in that region. And it's a natural signal from your body. It's actually done on purpose by your body to accumulate fat in that middle region. Of course, it's not sightly, and it's typically tied with other problems with your health, like I mentioned before, diabetes, heart disease, high cholesterol. So let's just jump right in. Intermittent fasting, and you guys may have heard this buzz term or maybe even practice it, and I did want to stress it. So it's essentially selecting a smaller window to eat, consuming food at a specific time, starting it, and a specific time ending it. And over here you'll see it's a popular rule that a lot of folks follow, the 16-8 rule, meaning 16 hours of no food and an 8-hour window to eat your breakfast, lunch, and dinner, to squeeze that in. And the bullet I have here, so let me get my marker tool. Simply put, you're basically giving your body the fuel, the food to eat when your digestive system is primed to really break it down and not going outside that window, because then your digestive system has to kick back up and may not be as efficient the next time. This gives your digestive system essentially a resting period, and then a small window, or like, a decent sized window, 8 hours is not bad, to really churn up all the acids and juices and enzymes to get the food broken down and utilized properly. By doing so, and there's been many studies around this, it showed that people have actually lost weight. And it could be the discipline by not eating for 16 hours, but also the fact that you're giving your body the food when it's primed and turbocharged to break it down, and not outside of that window really lets your body turn up the heat, turn up the metabolism, and get the nutrients out of your food and into your body without accumulating excess weight due to the amount of carbohydrates you're eating, not being fully digested, etc. So, final meal timing. Avoid eating too late in the day. This goes a little bit hand in hand with the concept of intermittent fasting, which is proven to reduce weight. By not eating too late in the day. If you practice intermittent fasting, you shouldn't be doing that anyway. But if you're not eating too late in the day, what that means is that you're stopping the food consumption, and by not eating too late in the day, you're allowing the most efficient part of your digestion to go at the food you're eating. Now, if you eat later in the day, the breakdown of those foods is not as efficient, and that specifically has a detrimental effect on your body. Okay, so I did want to jump into macros and micros right now. Macros are the larger food categories to break down, like protein, carbs, and fats. Make this up. And when people talk macros, they're typically talking about what is your ratio of carbs to protein to fat, right? And over here, I have a typical breakdown that I like. And again, this varies greatly based on your size and weight. Protein, I would personally say anything from 150 to 230 grams per day. Carbs, 230 grams per day. Fat, 51 grams per day. And this gives you a profile of around 2,300 calories per day. Now, eating that much protein, I can tell you, is difficult. This is a type of a diet that goes lower on the carbs, tying into keto and Atkins diets, right? So it's lower carbs and higher protein. Number one, and we'll get into this a little later, the source of your proteins, the source of any of these macros is extremely important, right? Not every protein is created equivalent. Not every carb is created equivalent. It's good to know the differences. Same thing with fats. Know the differences and know the benefits of the different foods out there that'll still give you the same amount of protein, carbs, or fat. So I can tell you getting this much protein in can be difficult, especially if you're vegan or vegetarian. I personally am vegetarian. There are a lot of vegetarian sources, but many times they're also tied to carbohydrates. So something, let's say, like peanuts or brown rice, typically high in protein, but they also provide a lot of carbohydrates. So something to consider, and we'll jump in to that a little later. All right. Okay, continuing on with macros. So I'll start by saying buy organic where you can, and I'll go into more detail behind the science of it and some things to watch out for. So starting with proteins. Okay, these are good sources for proteins. I've included some vegan sources as well. So eggs, fish, red meat, chicken, turkey. Tofu, vegan sources include both carbs or fats along with the protein. So some of those are peanuts, quinoa, lentils, chickpeas, avocados, kale, chia seeds, brown rice. So many times the carbohydrates within that will appear as starches or fiber. That's something to consider. And other times you'll also get fats, like with avocado, right? So decent amount of protein, but also heavy in fats. Now, again, it's very important to consider the sources that you're getting your protein from. Also, very important to consider is when you cook meats, animal products, this includes dairy, eggs, and then white meat, red meat. What ends up happening is that the more you cook it, the more there's compounds in there that turn slightly carcinogenic, and proteins become denatured, and fats can be damaged. So animal fats, especially at higher temperatures, they can be damaged. Many times what happens is the sources of cholesterol, the ratios of cholesterols, which is like VLDL, LDL, low density, very low density lipoproteins, and HDL, which is your high density, your good cholesterol, the ratios start changing in them, and it goes more towards the negative rather than the positive. The more you cook your animal products, so just something to consider. The more you cook it, carcinogens get released into the meats, or eggs and dairy products. And number two, you can also change the cholesterol profile. So not necessarily great things the more you cook your meats, but of course we have to cook them because you don't want to get sick. You don't want some kind of bacteria or parasite issues going on when you're consuming it. The next one, carbohydrates. Complex carbs are the best, where fiber is present along with the sugars found in foods. So whole grain oats, beans, chickpeas, black beans, millet, sweet potato, squash, quinoa, brown rice, whole grain wheat. And here's the important thing to consider. When you're consuming carbohydrates, if there's fiber naturally found in the food, that actually blunts the impact of the carbohydrate on your entire system. It blunts the impact of having an excess insulin dump because you see so much sugar coming in initially. The fiber really slows that down. Another great thing is that fiber, the pulp, the fiber of fruits and vegetables, they are also complex with a lot of the nutrition. A lot of the vitamins and minerals are complexed into the fiber. So for folks that are juicing, I do recommend not juicing. It's important to keep the pulp and fiber in there. Not only that, for me personally, I think it tastes better when it's thicker. It's almost like a milkshake. But there's a lot of nutrition in there, and it also helps blunt the impact of the sugar when you're consuming the carbohydrate. So I have a small note here: eat veggies, fruits with the skin where possible, such as sweet potatoes, carrots, cucumbers, as much of the fiber and nutrients are stored here. Same thing I just mentioned. So keeping the skin on is great. Of course, you want to clean it. You don't want to get sick. But it's much better to keep the skin on the fruits and veggies. So for fats, avocados, fatty fish, most nuts, chia seeds, extra virgin olive oil, full fat organic yogurt. Now, yogurt being dairy, so if you're sensitive to dairy and lactose, of course you don't want to be consuming that. But these are sources of healthy fats, and some of them have protein associated, also included in the fats, like fish, of course, avocados, yogurt, good sources, and chia seeds, good sources of healthy fats and some protein. So back on to weight loss, a bit of a summary here now. For diet, practice intermittent fasting. Water and black coffee are fine during fasting periods. Focus on eating higher protein meals with complex carbohydrates. So again, this goes back into the keto side and the Atkins diets. And a quick note on keto. So keto, being ketogenic essentially means that for a period of time, your body is not consuming enough carbohydrates to consider that your primary source of fuel. Your body starts changing over to ketones. And what it does is it breaks fat down to create these ketones and then burns the ketones as fuel. By doing so, you naturally start reducing the amount of fat accumulated around your body. And that's the whole point of being ketogenic, or in ketogenesis, the whole point of the keto diet. So if you are not looking to go to that extreme and you want to have some carbohydrates in your diet, you can still practice, maybe not necessarily being in ketosis, but making your body not have as many carbohydrates available for it as fuel, so it starts opting for other sources of fuel in the body. And typically we want to keep the protein up during this time because we don't want the body burning excess protein and essentially breaking down our muscle. We want it to start using the fat as a reserve source of energy. So pack meals instead of eating out. Even if you are going out and you're planning on having a light meal and a salad, that's okay. But you also got to consider the fact that restaurants, fast food restaurants, they're cooking with a ton of salt, a ton of butter. They might be reusing the butter and oils that they're cooking in. So the oils may have gotten rancid already, but they're cooking in this. And of course, because we live in a world full of capitalism, this is just the way things are, mass produced, mass prepared. So you might not be getting the healthiest version of the food or prepared food that you think you're getting. So if you're in control and you can take those raw ingredients and cook the foods at home, of course that's going to be a better option than consuming foods out there that have been overcooked, oversweetened, or loaded with like fats for the flavor, but we don't necessarily know if they're good fats, if they're organic sources, etc. Do not overcook meals. Do not practice juicing sugary fruits. I went over that just before. Do smoothies instead. Of course, the importance is the fiber and the nutrients you lose when you juice. You don't want to lose those. And this is what I mentioned before. The fibers in the fruits blunt the impact of sugar in your system, much better than drinking just the juice of the fruit. So something to consider: exercise or do cardio on an empty stomach first thing in the morning is perfect. Now, this is a very powerful tool. One, you're going to start building muscle. Two, it's important to consider that if you're going to lift weights without any carbohydrates in your system, especially when you first start out, it's going to be a little difficult to push through an entire workout. And you may not see the same amount of weight or strength that you're pushing up when it comes to weightlifting. You may not be able to run as far as when you're doing cardio, but it's a very powerful tool to kickstart your metabolism, to start finding sources of energy within your body if you don't have those glucose stores from eating a meal right before, or like 30-40 minutes before doing an activity. So working on an empty stomach, doing cardio on an empty stomach is a very powerful tool I recommend when you're trying to kickstart your weight loss. Consuming protein within 45 minutes of exercise. There's been some contention about this, but it's essentially the prime window that you want to consume protein after a workout, especially in a workout where you're weight training, where your body will make full use of that protein instead of damaging your own muscle tissues, which is also a big source of protein within the body. You're able to basically repair or provide it the nutrients it needs at the right time. So one of the tips and tricks is when it comes to weightlifting, consuming protein within 45 minutes of strength exercises. All right, so on this slide, I just have some ideas, meal ideas, different alternatives, different options to consider. And I get it. If you're married or in a relationship, you have kids, typically you'll be eating whatever's being cooked at that time. But I definitely recommend starting to fill up your fridge with these items, so the meals that are prepared include them in some configuration. And this is just to get a bit of spitball and get the idea behind some of these foods going. So option 1, eggs, spinach, and broccoli. Number 2, chicken, spinach, broccoli. 3, beef and brown rice, sauteed onions and mushrooms. 4, green smoothie on an empty stomach, and I'll be going over the green smoothie recipe later on in this presentation. 5, tofu, broccoli, and onions. So some hacks here I wanted to discuss. You can replace an entire meal with a protein shake if trying to lose weight. So when I say protein shake, I don't just mean the powder and that's it, powder and water or powder and milk. I mean smoothies where you have multiple whole food ingredients along with the powder. And what I'm alluding to here is going back to my green smoothie. I'll be jumping into that in a second. It's important to start reducing your overall carbohydrate intake. Replace with protein and healthy fats wherever you can. I stressed this a couple times already before. Now, for the carbohydrates you do consume, it's better for you if you're consuming whole grains and the fiber with the carbohydrates. Now, other things to consider though, if you're diabetic, if high glycemic index foods really affect you, then you may want to look into cutting out carbs anywhere you can. That means even whole grains, because many times those whole grains can be higher in the glycemic index, which is how it impacts your body and the production of insulin, or the amount of insulin needed for the amount of glucose coming into your system. It's okay to be hungry at times. Calorie reduction while you exercise is a shortcut to weight loss. So many times people just eat whenever they're hungry, meaning that it's not just the 3 meals. They'll be eating 7, 8, 9 times a day, but they're not eating healthy foods in between. So there's nothing wrong with eating small healthy meals throughout the day, more than just breakfast, lunch, and dinner. That actually helps kickstart your metabolism each time. But now if you're eating candy bars, drinking soda, grabbing a slice of pizza even after you ate lunch, having 2-3 bags of chips a day, those, and I mean this should be obvious at this point, in the time period we live in, is very common that these are not things you want to consume, but they're actually going to mess up your metabolism and fill your body with unhealthy, not nutrient dense foods. One thing to consider is when you consume these foods, you got to also think of your body as a bank. So whole foods typically bring with them with the nutrition that they bring all the different enzymes, coenzymes, and antioxidants with them that your body needs to digest and properly assimilate those foods. If it's not there, like if you're not consuming a whole grain, for example, your body has to actually provide those enzymes and nutrients to properly digest that food. Your body doesn't have an infinite store of these. So something to consider while you want to consume whole foods, not overly processed and refined foods, because eventually your body's bank of these nutrients and enzymes runs out, and once it goes into the negative, then you start having detrimental health effects. So you don't want to be in the negative when it comes to that. If you build muscle, your body will naturally burn calories to maintain it. So it's an important concept to consider. Weightlifting in itself burns calories, right? So you may not have to run 3-4 miles a day, and the weightlifting in its own right will be burning calories by your body. But once you have that muscle on you, once you have that as part of your frame, it's important to understand that you're in a beneficial place, and it should be motivating you to continue doing it, because just by having that muscle on your system, to maintain it, your body's burning more calories than if you didn't have that muscle, even if you're just sitting there. So it's important to consider that and continue to motivate you to continue working out, because over time, not only are you putting that muscle mass on so you get the shape that you're looking to get, you're also going to naturally 24/7 be burning more calories due to maintaining that muscle on your frame. Okay, testosterone can increase with certain compound weight lifts such as barbell squats. Compound movements are, in a nutshell, the definition I like to give is these are weightlifting exercises where multiple groups of muscles are being used to push the weight or pull the weight. It's not an isolation one where, let's say, a small muscle group is being primarily used by itself with very little help from other groups. Like if you're doing a specific bicep exercise or tricep exercise, those are more isolation. But if you're squatting, deadlifting, or doing bench press, you're engaging a lot of muscles. Like bench press will engage this whole area: chest, shoulder, tricep, forearm. Like a lot of them are engaged for those types of presses. Same thing with squats. Your core and essentially your entire lower half of your body are being engaged, along with your arms are being engaged to help keep the bar steady. So those are compound movements, and if you might be aware of this, it's fairly common in the lifting community, the gym community. Those compound movements increase the amount of testosterone production your body has. So essentially the hormone that makes us who we are as men, the anabolic state that we go into, the muscle growing state, and then other hormones which are made from testosterone like DHT, which give us the androgenic properties, being aggressive, having a deep voice, having hair on our chest. Like these are all coming together when we have the optimal zone for testosterone production. It also impacts mood, confidence, and libido, your sex drive. So it's very important to consider these and getting into that optimal state, and weightlifting is a great way to get there because it helps boost your testosterone up and keep it up. Now, weightlifting burns calories similar to running. I had mentioned this before. If done properly, 45 minutes of weightlifting can burn anywhere from 175 to 275 calories. I typically say that we're in the 275 range or more. If you do 45 minutes of like a no BS type of workout, it can really push your body into that calorie burning phase. And then, like I mentioned, your body's going to naturally burn calories just from maintaining that muscle mass. All right, I want to stress this now. So it's important to see where your calories are coming from. I mentioned this just before. You need to control that because it's not just about the amount. It's where it's coming from. For example, 500 calories from tortilla chips, corn tortilla chips, is not going to be the same as 500 calories from avocado. Your body's going to be able to utilize the fats and calories and nutrients in the avocado better than it can the nutrients from the corn tortilla. Corn tortilla is typically going to give you that burst of energy response and also a bit of an insulin spike, where the avocado is going to give you like a smoother response to the amount of energy coming in the form of calories. Now, another thing to consider, I mentioned this before, if you're eating meat and eggs, that's perfectly fine. It helps keep you lean, and it's a great source of protein without the amount of carbohydrates you typically found in vegetarian sources, vegetable sources and fruit sources. But you don't want to overcook them because it starts turning carcinogenic. So now on to the foods. Here, let me get my marker. The foods that will provide you with the nutrients, the carbs, protein, calories, the fats as well, but coming from a good source and is better to assimilate with your body because it's providing you with the nutrients needed to properly digest those foods. and also giving you other antioxidants, vitamins, and enzymes that your body and minerals that your body needs. So apples, peaches, pears, plums, grapes, berries, bananas, dates, all great sources of nutrients specifically for energy and fiber. Green spinach, kale, romaine, etc., and vegetables, walnuts, almonds, pecans, soaked and sprouted legumes, legumes and beans like kidney, chickpeas, dal, lentils, and 12-hour soak. So the importance of soaking essentially means that take a big pan, fill it with water enough to cover the top of, not the top of the pan, but if you put, once you put your legumes or beans in there, the water should be above that level. And over time, what ends up happening is when soaking in there, the water starts releasing some of the phytic acid, the phytates that are found in it. And phytic acid is produced by a lot of these different plants to protect them from being eaten, either from bacteria, from fungus and mold, from other animals, including humans, right? They have these natural protections in them. So by soaking them, you're giving an opportunity for those to be released in the water. You spill the water and then you can eat the food. Okay, healthy fats from coconut. This is saturated naturally, which prevents it from going rancid at high temperatures. Avocado, cold pressed olive oil. So one thing I want to mention about natural sources of saturated fats from the plants, from the plant side, not from the fats. So from animals. So saturation, without getting into the organic chemistry of it, essentially means that the fat molecule is very stable. The way it's configured, it's very stable. And you'll see a lot of tropical plants are naturally saturated when it comes to fats, like coconut or palm oil, because the plants provide natural protection against the high heat from the sun. And that protection that they give their natural produced fats, the oils that they produce, is by making them saturated. So there's benefits to that because it actually prevents it from going rancid. And there's a lot of data coming in, and this has been going on for the last 20 years or so, that saturated fats from the right sources are not bad for you. They're actually beneficial. One, they don't go rancid. And when I mean rancid, it means that they don't go bad. When fats go bad, besides the taste being awful and the smell being bad, it actually has negative effects in your body. It causes free radical damage, amongst other things, and is just generally not healthy. So humans have a process for artificially saturating fats so they're stable, so they can use cheaper fats like corn oil, which is not naturally saturated, and they hydrogenate it to make it saturated by adding hydrogen to the molecule. So that hydrogenation creates what's called a trans fat. They're not healthy for your body because your body essentially doesn't know what to do with them and how to properly digest them. So you want to avoid hydrogenated fats and trans fats in your diet for that very reason, because your body's unable to properly digest them. And they're not the same as a saturated fat produced naturally by a plant. If you drink, avoid beers, that is from the wheat family. If you absolutely must, hard liquor is a little better for you in that regard because there's less sugar in it, but that doesn't mean you want to drink too much. Now, again, this is more for weight loss. Alcohol in general is not good for you, whether it's beer, wine, or hard liquor, but just something to consider if you are in that weight loss trajectory, the amount of carbohydrates found in beer and wine. Okay, so going down this list, we just touched on this. Hydrogenated trans fats, they're difficult to digest, they're unnatural. I have a link for you here to click if you want more information on it. Avoid foods with aluminum or alumina. Aluminum as a metal is not required by the human body. It actually displaces other metals that are needed by the body and semi-metals, and it reduces utilization of important elements in the body such as calcium. Also, one thing to consider, deodorants that have aluminum, because it's very porous, like under your armpits where you're putting the deodorant. One, you don't want to be blocking the hydration coming out of your armpits. It's a natural function. But two, yes, when you keep having it, and it's typically produced in response of stress. When you sweat under your armpits, it's not typically a response to physical exercise or high heat. So it's a different type of sweat, and bacteria tends to accumulate, which is why it stinks and smells, which is why people don't want it there. Now, aluminum helps block the pores, so you'll see a lot of deodorants have that, but then you're also injecting, essentially, putting aluminum in an area of your body where it can be easily absorbed by the body, and again, it's not healthy for you because it displaces other nutrients like calcium. So they do have a lot of natural deodorants that don't have it, that go more towards working towards a bacteria buildup in that area. So you don't get that smell. Phthalates, bisphenol A, BPA, there's also other bisphenols, but they're hormone disruptors. Xenoestrogens, very important, especially if you're a guy, you don't want these xenoestrogens. These are foreign molecules not produced by yourself, and many times not produced by other animal sources. They're coming from plastics, or products like phthalates and bisphenol A, which essentially act as estrogen in the body, but they're foreign estrogens. And when you have too much of this, you start getting the effects of having too much estrogen in your body. And if you're a man, that's not a good thing. Just something to consider. Avoid dairy products with external hormones added, so BGH and RBST, bovine growth hormone. Now, this is added to cows to increase the milk production and the amount of fat that their body accumulates. So there's more yield from each animal. What can happen because of it, one, you're ingesting artificial hormones because a lot of those hormones end up in the milk. And I know they say that there's been no study to prove that cows treated with hormones are any different. But from some of the literature I've read, the amount of milk that they're producing causes infection on their udders. And then what ends up happening is that pus gets in the milk because of this infection. So kind of disgusting. And I'm not sure if it's 100% associated with the bovine growth hormone. It could just be over milking of these cows. But a lot of the cows treated with bovine growth hormone are producing a lot more milk, and their sensitive udders tend to get damaged because of the amount of milk they're producing that's being extracted from them. Okay, avoid cooking on non-stick Teflon pans. They release PFOAs, and these are like fluoromolecules with fluorine and other toxins in your food, and these are known to be carcinogenic. They're not good for you. They also kind of ruin the taste. If you ever cooked on a Teflon pan, like the non-stick pans that have been around for the last 25 years or so, there's a smell that they release. And to me personally, I don't like the way it's the smell I don't like, but I also don't like the food being cooked on it. And that smell, like the PFOAs are being released into your food. Your food is kind of soaking it up, and you don't want to be consuming that. I do recommend instead using ceramic or stainless steel. I know for stainless steel, it can be difficult to cook on because it doesn't have non-stick. Technically, there are tricks and methods to cook on stainless steel, though, like preparing, like heating up your pan prior, using the right amount of oil or butter prior to cooking on it. Ceramic kind of negates that because it has its own non-stick properties. The only problem with ceramic is that you can lose the coating over time. Okay, so next, avoid sugary drinks, fruit juices, as they're loaded with sugar, naturally occurring added without the fiber, which may cause insulin spikes and inflammation. Inflammation typically happens when you have excess sugar in your system and the insulin is not able to negate it. So again, even natural sources like fruit juices, even freshly squeezed juices, you want to avoid as much as you can because of the lack of fiber in the juice. All right, avoid synthetic food colors. Some cause allergies like yellow number 5. There's also been other problems with other food colorings like the blues and the reds out there. It could be sensitivity to them, or it could be allergies. Now, know that these synthetic food colors, they have a chemical makeup to them, and many times that chemical makeup can be mildly toxic to a person. So wherever you can, avoid them or consume foods that have natural food colorings in them. You're seeing more and more of these come out. Avoiding MSG, monosodium glutamate, as it provides a specific glutamate. Glutamate is actually a neurotransmitter that's produced in the body, and it does have a purpose in the body, an important purpose. It's a stimulatory neurotransmitter. It causes excitation. Is part of the fight or flight response. So you need it there for that side of your mental functioning. Now, MSG, which occurs naturally in nature as well, this specific glutamate is difficult for the body to assimilate. It's similar to regular glutamate found in the body, but because of the way it works in the body, it can cause headaches. So typically, like you'll see like Chinese food, they'll say no MSG because MSG is actually a flavoring. Umami is the actual flavoring. It's a type of flavor. It's kind of like a meaty, smoky type of flavor. and they use MSG to create that flavor in the foods. But if you're predisposed to it, MSG can cause headaches. It's not good for your brain, and it's best to avoid it because of that. Now, avoid excess caffeine, all sources, as this can trigger anxiety if you are susceptible. Now, I know folks that drink 3, 4, 5 cups a day to get through their day. And what you may not realize is the way caffeine works, and without getting too technical in it, it makes your body think that it's not time to go to bed. And it does so by binding to adenosine receptors in your brain and not letting adenosine bind to it. And when adenosine binds to those receptors in excess, it tells your body that it's time to go to bed, you've exerted enough energy for a day. So caffeine blocks that response from happening, and then your body thinks, hey, we need to be awake. And part of the we need to be awake response by the body is releasing epinephrine, adrenaline, dopamine, serotonin, like these different neurotransmitters, this cocktail of neurotransmitters. But what can happen with too much of that is you get into this overly excited, stimulated state. And if you're prone to anxiety, this can trigger anxious episodes, which can be very detrimental for your health. It can be very detrimental for your relationships, your responses to people. You might come off aggressive or angry, or just you kind of mute down, you become introverted and not being yourself. So something to consider when it comes to caffeine consumption. Next one, using Teflon nonstick pans. I mentioned this before. The actual chemical name for PFOA, perfluorooctanoic acid, and for PFOS, perfluorooctane sulfonate. So these are carcinogenic. Your body doesn't know what to do with them, and Teflon nonstick, like the black pans that kind of glitter, those release it directly into your food. Avoid artificial sweeteners like sucralose and aspartame. They both have negative effects on the brain. If you get a chance, Google sucralose and crystals in the brain. And aspartame, again, it can be very excitatory in the body, so something you might want to avoid. If you are experiencing hair loss or adult acne, avoid creatine as it increases the hormone responsible dihydrotestosterone. I mentioned this earlier because of the masculinizing effects of DHT, dihydrotestosterone, which is like the more potent form of testosterone for specific parts, for specific effects in the body. Now, too much of it causes oily skin and hair loss. And it causes the hair loss, by the way, because, and the science is still wrapping their heads around this, but typically follicles that are sensitive to DHT start getting inflamed because of excess DHT. They can't handle it in the scalp area, and that inflammation over time leads to scarring of the follicles, which makes it smaller and smaller and smaller until the hair it produces gets thinner and thinner, which causes diffuse thinning. And it can be exacerbated with stress. So just something to consider. I personally avoid creatine at all costs because of that. Avoid non-organic wheat products due to glyphosate Roundup treatment. They do this to make harvesting easier. So Roundup is made by a company called Monsanto, which is very big into genetically modified organisms, GMOs. And what they do is they create a genetically modified version of a plant that is resistant to their chemical that they also sell called Roundup, which is like a weed killer, very strong weed killer. You might see it in Home Depot. Now, in the farming industry, farmers have to buy those GMO seeds, plant it, let the wheat or corn or whatever grow, soybean grow, and now they can spray it with Roundup to kill all the weeds around it, essentially, without killing the actual plant, because the plant is resistant to the glyphosate because it's genetically modified to be resistant to the glyphosate. Now, glyphosate is a tricky compound. Depending on how you read the studies, the way you're reading it, it can either come off as extremely carcinogenic, forming tumors, or the opposite, where the studies may have been flawed. I personally try to avoid it at all costs. I think any kind of non-natural chemical compound like that is dangerous to any living organism, regardless if you're a tiny bug or you're as big as a human or an elephant. It's not good for you. Now, what farmers are also doing is they may not be using GMO seeds from Monsanto, but they're using glyphosate on purpose. And what they're doing is when they're harvesting the wheat, for example, they spray with glyphosate because it starts killing the bottom of the wheat plant. And what that makes, what the benefit of that is to the farmers is that it makes it easier to harvest because it's easier to cut down when the bottom is damaged and it's not strong when it's fully alive and full of water, nutrients, fiber, starch, protecting it. All that gets damaged by the glyphosate, and then the plants are easier to harvest. So I highly recommend doing organic to avoid being stuck in consuming grains that may claim non-GMO wheat, but they may, and it's not all, I absolutely cannot say for all. There is literature out there for this, though, that they use glyphosate as a compound to make harvesting easier, and you don't want it in your system in case it's not thoroughly washed off the wheat. So something to consider. Okay. Next, the following foods promote inflammation. So grains. Now, I'll read this first and I'll go into detail here. So grains have chemical compounds that protect the grasses from being eaten. These phytochemicals, or anti-nutrients, you might see them being called, promote inflammation in the human body. So here are some examples. Wheat, you'll see phytates and gluten. Millet, panisinade. Corn is zein. Rice is orzenin. And even oats have something called avenin. Now, these are compounds naturally created by the plants because they don't want certain parts of the plant body to be eaten. So these are natural defenses to deter animals because they may taste bitter or they may have slight toxic effects within them. They're strong enough to maybe harm bugs or other plants or molds out there, but maybe not enough to immediately harm a human. Now, over time, they cause inflammation in the human body. And some are more potent at it than others, like phytates and gluten found in wheat can be more detrimental than, let's say, the avenin typically found in oats, which has a much smaller allergic profile than, let's say, gluten does. It's important to consider this because it's also important to understand how plants work. So when it comes to plants, like the grasses, the roots, the stems, the leaves don't want to be eaten. The roots, of course not, right? So like things like garlic and onion, they have things like alanine in them to prevent them from being eaten. So that strong odor, that strong smell that we may like because the taste of it, gives food a lot of flavor or adds a little bit of spice or kick to our foods. Those are actual natural protections that the plants produce to ward off things like bacteria or fungus or bugs because they don't want to be eaten. Typically, the plant creates fruits that it wants to be eaten. The fruits are the messengers, essentially to get some animals to come, eat the fruit, take the seeds, excrement them in an area along with natural fertilizers to make the plants grow, and that's part of their whole reproduction process. So the fruits, most of the times, are what are the healthier options. Now, leaves, stems, grasses, and roots also contain a ton of nutrients, which can be very beneficial to the human body. But it's just something important to consider that things like grains, they don't want to be eaten, and when you consume an excess amount of them, you're increasing that load of inflammation on your body. Now, again, genetics play a big role in this, and your overall health, your overall diet plays a big role into this. How much is that inflammation going to affect you? Are you going to notice it or not? Is it going to lead to problems as you get older? All things to consider. Because oats are a great source for protein and fiber. Even whole wheat is, whole grains are. Same thing with brown rice. So there is a certain amount that you can get away with, but it's something to consider that the plant's natural defenses are trying to deter other animals and bugs from eating it. And some of those may not kill you, but they might be slightly inflammatory when consumed in the body. Okay, so inflammation leads to all sorts of autoimmune disease. Some here, eczema, psoriasis, asthma, hives, allergies, hair loss, diabetes, to name a few. Heart disease being another one, a big one. And diet can be triggering a lot of this alongside with stress. Okay. Vitamins and supplements to take. Of course, you can add more or less to this, but these are some of the ones that I highly recommend. And I've given direct links here. I believe these are mostly just going straight to Amazon. I'm assuming most folks have Amazon or Amazon Prime and they can easily get them. A good food-based multivitamin for men. Vitamin D, at least 5,000 IUs, international units daily. Magnesium citrate. One thing to consider about minerals. Minerals, especially alkaline minerals like calcium, magnesium, potassium, phosphorus, iron, they are most bioavailable when they've gone through a process called chelation. Chelation is essentially, in a nutshell, binding alkaline mineral. Alkaline meaning the pH is higher. A higher pH means they're more base. Anything too low is more acidic, like acid. It's more in the acid profile. So chelation, and when you take an acid and a base, you combine the two, there's a chemical reaction that takes place. And specifically with these alkaline minerals, they take a weak acid, they put them together, and chelation happens. And you'll take citric acid, for example, and magnesium oxide, you put them together, and now you got magnesium citrate, which is a more bioavailable form, because chelation is very similar to the same processes that happens when plants consume these minerals and complex them within themselves and make it much more bioavailable for animals like humans to consume. We get the benefit of it versus eating the rock salt form of it, like calcium carbonate, like found in shells or found in the rocks, found in the Earth's crust. The calcium in the carbonate form is not chelated, and it's much more, one, is cheaper to manufacture and process into supplements, but two, is not as bioavailable. So your body has to provide the nutrients to naturally complex it within the body. It delays the whole process, and less of that calcium is going to be bioavailable for your body to use. Calcium is just one example. I listed calcium, magnesium citrate here because not only do they give your body these powerful elemental building blocks that are essential for hundreds of reactions in the body, but they also increase your body's alkalinity. Now, you don't want to be too alkaline, you don't want to be too base, meaning like your blood, your urine is a good indicator of this. But by being slightly alkaline, you provide an environment that is not conducive towards bacterial growth within the body. And if you go too acidic, which typically happens with an extremely poor diet, which is not nutritious, not providing you with alkaline minerals, and also stress. Stress makes your body go into this acidic state, this fight or flight response state. So that also puts you in the acidic state. What happens then is you start getting more inflammation, you start getting more infections. So calcium, magnesium help tilt the natural chelated forms, help tilt you more towards the alkaline state. Now there's other chelated versions of these minerals out there. Thioronate is one of them. Orotate is another, like when it's bound to orotic acid. Just some examples that are much more bioavailable than the cheaper magnesium oxide and calcium carbonate forms. A daily probiotic. Now the link here specifically I wanted to mention, one thing for me personally, I struggle with allergies, which is linked to, many things, primarily my immune system function, but I don't want to promote excess histamine in my system because I am sensitive to histamine, hence my allergies, which for the most part are under control now through healthy diet and being able to clear my mind and being able to handle stress better. But one thing to consider is there's a lot of strains of good bacteria out there that promote histamine production in the body. So if you are sensitive to it, there are probiotics on the opposite end which don't promote it or help balance your histamine production. So you got to be careful out there. All that science is not going to be in here because it's quite a bit to read, but the link I have here is specifically a brand and a model that they sell that does not have the bacteria, the probiotics that promote histamine production in the body. These are actually more balanced for just your overall gut health without giving you or without making your body produce more histamine. So meal replacement green smoothie recipe. This gives you about 1.5 servings. I typically just consume the whole thing myself because I love it. Now this can be used for general health, can be used as a protein shake after a good workout, or it can be used as a meal replacement, or all three, all of the above. So I do highly recommend, if you're trying to really cut down on your weight, you consume this in place of meals wherever you can, because it really is a holistic source of a lot of nutrients for the body that are complex through natural food. So I'll start with the recipe. 1 cup of ice, 1 cup of water, half scoop of Vega vegan protein. I usually do 1 scoop, but half is perfectly fine if you want to conserve on it. Their sport protein is what I like to use because it has about 30 grams of protein per serving, which is great from a vegan source. You can also use whey protein if you want in this, if you're okay consuming whey. 2 tablespoons of hemp powder, 1 organic banana, 1 bowl of grapes. I would prefer organic as well. Typically that means 12 to 15 regular sized grapes. I'm not talking about the jumbo grapes. I'm talking about like the regular sized grapes. A good sprinkle of organic cinnamon powder. Cinnamon helps increase glucose uptake, improving insulin sensitivity in fat and muscle tissue. So the sugars that are found in this form in this recipe naturally because of the banana and the grapes. The cinnamon really helps blunt the impact of it. So it's also a secret weapon when it comes to sugar metabolism. I have the 2 links here for the sources I specifically like, Just Hemp, available on Amazon, and Vega Sports Vanilla Protein. They also have chocolate available, also on Amazon. It's a vegan source of protein, primarily based on pea protein.